NASA SpaceX Crew 10 mission as it returns back home to planet Earth. Dragon Endurance departed the International Space Station yesterday evening at 6:15 p.m. Eastern Time or 3:15 p.m. Pacific Time on August 8th for those of us here in California. On board Crew 10 are NASA astronauts Anne McClain and Nichole Ayers, JAXA astronaut Takuya Onishi, and Roscosmos cosmonaut Kirill Peskov, and they are now on their way to their targeted splashdown site off the coast of San Diego, California.
And there on your screen on the bottom left, you can actually see the telemetry catching back up.
You see them getting very close to the coast of California.
Dragon, SpaceX, comm check.
SpaceX Dragon, we have you loud and clear.
I have you the same, Dragon. Expect automated chute deployment.
Dragon copies.
And so we did just hear that call up from the Corps, the Crew Operations Resource Engineer here in SpaceX Mission Control to the Crew 10 astronauts currently aboard Dragon. Confirmation that we have reacquired signal with the Dragon spacecraft, and you can see that the speed is rapidly slowing down as it begins its final phase, and we will have confirmation of those parachutes deploy in just a few moments.
Yeah, you can also see the altitude in the bottom left-hand corner. You can see it getting closer and closer back down to Earth.
GPS converge. Expect nominal altitude for drogue chute deployment.
And the Corps just informing the crew of what's going on. They're going to be feeling a lot of different things inside of the spacecraft where they can't see what's going on outside. So they will expect the drogue parachutes to deploy, so they'll know what that feeling is inside of the spacecraft. And again, you can follow along the altitude in the bottom left-hand corner as the crew is getting closer and closer to planet Earth.
And we are expecting those drogue parachutes to deploy a little bit after 8:29 a.m. Pacific, 11:29 a.m. Eastern.
And the crew there on your screen rotating in their seats in preparation for that splashdown. During that reentry, they are leaning more on their backs, but when they are coming in for splashdown, they can sit a little bit more upright in preparation for that touchdown.
And on your screen from left to right is Roscosmos cosmonaut Kirill Peskov, NASA astronaut Nichole Ayers.
Brace for drogue window.
NASA astronaut Anne McClain and JAXA astronaut Takuya Onishi. Again, they are getting prepared for that drogue deploy, which should be happening in just a few moments from now. Again, we expect that a little bit after 8:29 a.m. Pacific, 11:29 a.m. Eastern, and it will be followed shortly thereafter by the main parachutes deploying. And there you're seeing a live look as from the recovery team, a helicopter that has a camera tracking the spacecraft during its reentry. We do have confirmation that the drogue deploy is underway.
There are those two drogue
Visual
chutes.
and two healthy drogues.
Copy healthy drogues. Copy healthy drogues.
And a great live view from the spacecraft itself, seeing those two healthy drogues deployed.
And the spacecraft has now slowed down to less than 200 kilometers per hour, and it is now just over 2 kilometers above the water as it prepares for splashdown, and we should have that main parachute deploy in just a few moments to continue slowing the spacecraft down to about 16 miles per hour at the time of splashdown.
There's the main chutes deployed. They're going to open up here shortly.
Main chute descent rate nominal.
And we do have confirmation and a visual
Dragon
view.
copies. Dragon copies.
1,000 meters. 1,000 meters.
And
We copy 1,000 meters.
And there's a great look of the Dragon Endurance spacecraft as it makes its way to its splashdown site off the coast of California under those 4 main parachutes that have now deployed and about 900 meters away from the water surface.
Dragon, 800 meters. Dragon, 800 meters.
800 meters.
Crew monitoring their altitude as they make their way to splashdown. I love these daytime views that we get. We don't always get to pick the time when the crew splashes down, but it's awesome when we have a great morning and a clear view watching as the Dragon Endurance spacecraft carrying Crew 10 is...
SpaceX Dragon, 600 meters. SpaceX Dragon, 600 meters.
I copy 600 meters.
Crew just 600 meters away from splashdown.
And just over a minute away from that targeted splashdown time, again expected around 8:33 a.m. Pacific, 11:33 a.m. Eastern. Now about 500 meters away from the surface of the water. And slowed down to about 35 kilometers per hour. Again, it'll continue to slow down.
SpaceX Dragon, 400 meters. SpaceX Dragon, 400 meters. Splashdown. Brace for splashdown.
SpaceX copies 400 meters and crew are braced for splashdown.
We just saw an incredible view there of the Dragon as it re-entered under some cloud cover. And we should be regaining some of those live views from the recovery zone momentarily as it gets resituated to capture the return. The spacecraft is now about 200 meters above the ocean and it has slowed down to about 30 kilometers per hour. Again, it will continue to slow down until about 16 kilometers per hour. And there we can see another live look of the Dragon Endurance spacecraft carrying Crew 10 back home to Earth following their 5-month mission, moments away from splashdown.
SpaceX Dragon, splashdown. SpaceX Dragon, happy splashdown.
SpaceX copies splashdown.
And we did just hear that confirmation of splashdown. The view that you're seeing on your screen is a little bit delayed, which is why we don't have that visual confirmation yet, but we do have that verbal confirmation between the crew and the Corps that they have successfully splashed down, and Dragon Endurance has now returned home. And there is that live look of Dragon Endurance as it sits on top of the ocean off the coast of San Diego, California.
Dragon, SpaceX, we see the onboard for Power 1 28-volt converter. No crew action required at this time. Stand by for more words.
Dragon copies, no crew action on the caution. Dragon copies, no crew action on the caution.
Dragon Endurance has now returned home, and NASA astronauts Anne McClain, Nichole, Ayers, JAXA astronaut Takuya Onishi,
and SpaceX Dragon for step 1.2, Dragon for step 1.2, 800, we see 4 fired.
and
Dragon, we see the same.
And so just about 7 minutes ago, Dragon Endurance did return home, and NASA astronauts Anne McClain, Nichole, Ayers, along with JAXA astronaut Takuya Onishi and Roscosmos cosmonaut Kirill Peskov are back on Earth after an approximately 17.5-hour journey from space.
SpaceX recovery ship and team has been waiting for Dragon splashdown, and they're now currently making their way to the splashdown location. The teams have been ready and waiting.
Dragon, SpaceX, we are go for recovery personnel to approach the capsule. Expect fast boats alongside in about 1 minute.
Copy 1 minute. Copy, you guys are on it. Thanks. You guys are on it. Thanks.
And once they begin that lift, it takes less than 10 minutes or so for it to be completed. And so it'll be safely inside that basket there at the end of the ship, where the dragon's egg, or dragon's nest is what it's known as. And then about 10 minutes or so from then, it'll be ready for hatch open. And you do see that lift is now underway as the Dragon Endurance spacecraft makes its way onto the recovery ship, the Shannon, that is staged off the coast of San Diego, California, following splashdown of the Dragon Endurance and the Crew 10 astronauts currently aboard.
And as this is happening, the crew is still strapped in to their seats with the 5-point harnesses, and they'll remain strapped in through the translation of the spacecraft to the deck and until the medical officer actually greets them. Then they will begin to unbuckle themselves and start egressing the spacecraft.
And so Dragon will remain in the nest during the crew extraction and then for the journey back to port. So that lift of the Dragon Endurance spacecraft just happened.
Stand by for translation to egress platform.
Dragon copies.
So that hatch on the Dragon Endurance spacecraft is now open, and teams are working to get Crew 10 out and back on Earth. Again, they will be initially checked out by a SpaceX medical director. You did just see him go in there a moment ago to make sure that they are feeling okay and are ready to egress or exit the spacecraft.
We are also seeing the recovery crew install that hatch seal protection. This helps protect both the seal of the hatch on the spacecraft as well as the crew as they're exiting the vehicle.
And so that hatch was officially opened at 9:10 a.m. Pacific, 12:10 p.m. Eastern Time, following a splashdown at 8:33 a.m. Pacific, 11:33 a.m. Eastern off the coast of San Diego, California. Again, they are doing some initial medical evaluations, and then they will be prepared to egress or exit the spacecraft and take their first breath of fresh air. Again, they will be assisted out of the spacecraft. That is completely normal. And then from there, they will go just a few steps and to do some additional medical checkouts. And then after the egress is finally complete and all 4 crew members are out of the spacecraft, they will take a helicopter back to dry land. And then from there in California, they will then aboard a NASA plane and make their way back home to Houston, Texas.
You can see the recovery team again preparing for that egress or exiting the spacecraft. They are using some aids. There's going to be a little bit of a ramp to enable the crew to easily exit the spacecraft. Instead of taking that large step, they can use that ramp to exit.
And recovering the crew is a bit of a joint operation. So we do have team members from NASA's Flight Operations Directorate out there, as well as NASA's Commercial Crew Program, and some flight surgeons from the NASA and international partners that will be prepared to retrieve and receive the crew following their egress or exit from the spacecraft. So it'll be nice to see some familiar faces, friendly faces, as they've worked with all of these teams in preparation for their space flight, and they will be greeting them upon their return.
You can see that the crew is removing some of their cargo that looked like their tablets that they were using to follow along with every procedure throughout the entire mission and ride on Dragon.
And after the crew is extracted or egressed out of the spacecraft, they will remove some additional cargo that's time critical. Often that is cargo that needs to be chilled for whatever reason, scientific samples and such that need to be in a specific environment. So that will be immediately offloaded after the crew exits the spacecraft, and then any additional cargo will be offloaded after it makes its way back to port off the coast of San Diego, California.
Looks like those are the footrests being removed that allow the crew to get out of their seats a little bit easier.
You do see one of those beds or slides that they use to help extract the crew, so we should see some of that egress taking place momentarily.
If you're just now joining us, you are watching the Crew 10 mission as we await the 4 crew members, NASA astronauts Anne McClain and Nichole Ayers, JAXA astronaut Takuya Onishi, and Roscosmos cosmonaut Kirill Peskov egress the Dragon spacecraft here shortly. They just recently, in the last 10 minutes, were able to take the first breath of fresh air in about 5 months. So we're excited to see them stand with gravity for the first time in 5 months.
And so they will likely be assisted, so we might not see the first steps, but they will be assisted out of the capsule. And it is important to note, since they were under the microgravity environment, their muscles, their bones, all of their systems haven't been exposed to Earth's gravity in over 5 months, which of course has some impacts on the human body, which is some of the important research that is done on the International Space Station to actually see how the human body is affected by the environment of outer space. And so that hatch did open about 6 minutes ago at 9:10 a.m. Pacific, 12:10 p.m. Eastern, following a splashdown at 8:33 a.m. Pacific, 11:33 a.m. Eastern, off the coast of California. Following that splashdown, the recovery team went out to meet the Dragon Endurance spacecraft. First out were the 2 fast boats, which began some safety checks and also began to safe the spacecraft in preparation to be lifted onto the recovery vessel, the Shannon. And the Shannon did arrive to the splashdown location less than 30 minutes after splashdown to then lift the spacecraft up on board the Shannon, and now we're just awaiting the crew to exit or egress the spacecraft. It does look like they are preparing for that crew egress here in just a moment. And the first Crew 10 crew member has now successfully egressed or exited the capsule. And that is NASA astronaut Anne McClain. She looks very excited to be back on Earth, given a arm pump. And the other 3 crew members should be following behind here shortly. So just moments ago, we did have NASA astronaut Anne McClain make her way out of the Dragon Endurance spacecraft, and now we are just standing by for the egress or exit of the following 3 Crew 10 crew members to complete the recovery process. So we are standing by for the egress of NASA astronaut Nichole Ayers, JAXA astronaut Takuya Onishi, and Roscosmos Kirill Peskov. And the second Crew 10 crew member has successfully egressed the capsule, and that is NASA astronaut Nichole Ayers. So both NASA astronauts Anne McClain and Nichole Ayers have successfully egressed or exited the capsule. Anne McClain served as the Crew 10 commander, and Nichole Ayers served as the Crew 10 pilot for this mission. So the final 2 crew members that we are awaiting are JAXA astronaut Takuya Onishi and Roscosmos cosmonaut Kirill Peskov. You did just see them removing 2 additional foot restraints, likely preparing to egress the final 2 Crew 10 crew members.
If you're just now joining us, NASA astronauts Anne McClain and Nichole Ayers have already egressed or exited the Dragon Endurance spacecraft. And again, we are waiting for the final 2 Crew 10 members to exit. JAXA astronaut Takuya Onishi and Roscosmos cosmonaut Kirill Peskov are still inside of the Dragon spacecraft.
So the crew did complete a 148-day mission, with 146 of those days docked to the International Space Station. During that time, they completed more than 2,300 orbits around the Earth, traveling more than 62.7 million statute miles. And NASA astronaut Anne McClain, who was the first to exit the spacecraft, has now totaled 352 total days in space. This was her second space flight. Her previous mission was aboard a Soyuz spacecraft. And then this was the first space flight for NASA astronaut Nichole Ayers, who was the second to exit the spacecraft. So she now has 148 days in space. And we do now see JAXA astronaut Takuya Onishi has exited the spacecraft. And this was also the second space flight for Onishi. So across his 2 missions, he has now totaled 263 days in space. So we are now just standing by for the final crew member of Crew 10 to make their way out of the spacecraft, and that is Roscosmos cosmonaut Kirill Peskov. To recap a little bit, the Crew 10 mission launched aboard a Falcon 9 rocket inside a Dragon spacecraft, which you're now seeing on your screen. That launch took place from NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida on March 14th. The crew then had a journey to the space station and docked shortly thereafter, spending about 5 months attached to the orbiting laboratory, conducting science and research before undocking yesterday, August 8th at 3:15 p.m. Pacific, 6:15 p.m. Eastern, for a 17.5-hour return journey back to Earth, splashing down off the coast of San Diego, California earlier this morning at 8:33 a.m. Pacific, 11:33 a.m. Eastern, which was less than an hour ago. And they are working to egress the final crew member. The initial 3 crew members have already safely exited the spacecraft, and those are NASA astronauts Anne McClain and Nichole Ayers, along with JAXA astronaut Takuya Onishi. So the egress of Roscosmos cosmonaut Kirill Peskov is now underway, and you can see him making his way out of the spacecraft right now. And there you have Roscosmos cosmonaut Kirill Peskov waving as he takes his final or initial steps on Earth. And he will now be taken back to some additional medical checks. And with that, all 4 Crew 10 crew members are safely back on Earth. They have all egressed.